Welcome back as we move into the next headline event for the sophomores on the card. A very interesting, very intriguing race, which has a couple of talented speedsters lining up against each other, and that's none other than the Sophomore Sprint, in a listed event over 1,200 meters. Kurt, there's a couple of quick horses in this race. Interesting race because we see a couple of cross form lines. We've got horses that have run against each other a couple of times, and then some new influences, as we'll get into from one or two raiders.
Yes.
To start it off, how are they looking in the betting?
At the moment, just Hit 'em Hard Sunshine sitting at around 16, 18 to 10 in the market. He's favourite, and rightly so. Trumpy sitting around 33 to 10, 7 to 2. We're Jamming and Piroshka sitting 6 to 1. And Iconic Destination, probably the value in the race at about 8 to 1.
Well, yeah, it looks like the way things have been priced up. Obviously, we're looking at the Trumpy and Hit 'em Hard Sunshine line coming to the top of the market, which is quite interesting because, as you touched on in terms of value there with Iconic Destination, I mean, he is coming from some serious form lines, running in behind Dave the King and Charles Dickens. I think you get the impression here, he went to Fairview, attempted the mile, which you'd want to do with a horse like this, is to test the stamina.
Yeah.
I think he looks like, without knowing the horse obviously as well as the connections, but he looks like a horse that might just be better suited to a straight 6 furlong.
Absolutely.
And therefore, I think at that price, you've got to say there's quite a bit of value about him.
Huge value in my opinion. And you know, when he won his maiden, he won very impressively, albeit not the strongest of fields, but you got to respect his second and third start behind Dave the King and Charles Dickens. And both of those starts were over 1,200 and 1,250 respectively.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's go to the rerun where the two horses at the top of the betting boards met each other last time out in the Need for Speed Sprint. So we've got Hit 'em Hard Sunshine, who's slightly off the pace in the Hollywood colours with the yellow cap at the moment. You've got Trumpy on the inside with a red cap, who, this horse, I mean, he looked like a racing phenom as a 2-year-old when he blew them away first time out. And obviously, a little issue came up next time out because he got to spend a lot of time off. And here he is, first run in the season, run a cracking race.
Yeah, as you can see, Grant moved up with a double handful, probably moved up a bit too quickly and probably needed the run. And also just a bit short of his best distance. He's probably looking for the 1,200 metres. And Trumpy, he's 2 from 2 now over 1,000 metres. And very impressive. I mean, everything that everybody thought he was as a 2-year-old, he reproduced it in the Need for Speed Sprint.
Yeah, that's correct. So it's going to be interesting to see now, obviously. I think the big question mark with Trumpy being that extra furlong. Physically, it looks like he's probably a candidate to get the trip. I think now second run, obviously it's going to be very hard to try and draw a line between the two until we see the race. But I think, as we touched on a little bit earlier, the interesting play here really is with those horses that have actually been exposed at a slightly higher level. And away from Iconic Destination, we can also include We're Jamming in that. I mean,
absolutely.
I was chatting to Justin Snaith about this horse, I think it was 2 weeks ago or so, and I drew a comparison between that top-class Lawrence Vernus filly called True to Life. Now, she is a Duke of Marmalade, just like We're Jamming, and you would think, wow, probably going to go a trip. So True to Life as a juvenile blew them away over sprints, and then she went 14 in a mile, and the guys were flabbergasted when she ran unplaced in those juvenile events. And then we brought her back to sprint trips, and she became, I think she placed in Group 1s from 2 till 6. She was a top sprinter, ran second in multiple Group 1 sprints.
Yeah.
She was 540 kilos of pure sprinting muscle. And this horse, We're Jamming, now a gelding, he's a little bit similar. He's a strong guy, he's got a lot of speed, and he probably just doesn't go further than 1,200 meters.
No, absolutely not. And in my opinion, he's also got to be the value in the race. I mean, you can't fault his 2 starts over the 1,200, and both of them being in features, the nursery and the Cape Thoroughbred Sales race. So he switches off beautifully in the race, especially over the 1,200. If there's a slight headwind on the day, he's got to be a horse you've got to respect in the race. And around 6 to 1, he's incredible value for punters.
Fantastic. Well, let's move on to the last. I'll tell you why, Kurt, because this is a bumper field. We've got a big field. And, of course, playing the quartets here is going to be the play. So let's touch on some roving bankers. Give us 2 roving bankers.
Well, just it's a minefield of a race. I mean, it's a perfect quartet race if you ask me, and that's why we've decided to take a quartet. I mean, obviously, the 2 obvious horses in the race have got to be Sun Dazed and Sundays and Let It Burn. The two form horses in the race, you can't really fault their form. If you look through the form of Sundays, there's Sergey, there's At My Command, and then he won again. He won last time, which it was an impressive win. But the former on his last start, the weight turnaround with Let It Burn, you've got to throw in Let It Burn. So we're going to rove those two horses in the quartet with a few horses.
So let's go through them, because I thought this number 6, King Regent, I remember him as a yearling. We raced the brother Crimson King with Green Street, and he was a very similar horse, quite long in the paston, very dynasty-like. He looked like he'd go a trip, but my goodness me, he popped up first time out at 20-1 running on. He's got 52 kilos here. He's got to have a squeak for a place chance.
Has to have a huge chance. And he won impressively, and he took off in those last few hundred metres when he won his maiden in impressive style too.
And I think looking at this horse Le Mans, Kurt, I mean, he's a horse who he started his juvenile career off very well. He's attempted to go a little bit of a trip. He hasn't quite performed up in class. Coming back to the straight, speedy type of horse, do you give him a chance as well?
Has to have a chance. I mean, look who he's been running against, Charles Dickens. You've got to take note when you see form like that. Drop him back to a 1200. You've got to respect him, and he is value as well, around 10-1.
Yeah, so I think roving bank are those two we touched on. Throw in those up-and-coming youngsters. You've got to look at older horses like the 3 Poltergeist, 4 Transact, and even further down the page, I mean, Mars Vigilante's got to have a chance at his best form.
He was taken up and running last time. You got all the excuses in the book last time. He's another horse that you got to throw in the quartets. If you turn over the page right at the back, Silent Trigger, another horse that's got interwoven form lines with Sun-Dazed. He's also got solid form. You got to consider him when you're putting him into a quartet too.
Fantastic. Well, Kurt, thanks very much. That's a very comprehensive wrap-up. And I'm going to ask you to nail your colours to the mast here. Give us a best bet for the day and possibly a value bet.
Just as far as the best bet goes, if Chansonnet comes back to her best, she doesn't need the second run of the rest syndrome like most professional punters use. I think she's got to be the best bet on the card. My value bet for the day, as we discussed earlier off air, is Wiley Riley. If you look at his 2 runs over 1400 in Durban, absolute crackers. And the form that's reproduced from those 2 runs have been standout runs. So that's my value bet at around 5-6-1.
Well, there we go. Kurt's going for a value bet. Another raider looking for some Race Cape bonus checks. And thank you very much for joining us for our first Taking the Reins preview show. We will be back before the World Sports Betting Fillies Guineas as we take you into what will be our second festival meeting. Thank you for tuning in. Happy racing.